Shedeur Sanders has spent most of this season on the sidelines, a promising quarterback stuck in the background of Cleveland's never-ending dysfunction. With Kevin Stefanski consistently dodging questions and ignoring calls to integrate Sanders, even as injuries piled up, the decision to keep him benched feels less tactical and more personal. Fans have started asking the obvious: if the Browns won't use him.
If you're into the real story and all the messy twists they don't show on highlight reels, go ahead and subscribe. And if you're sticking around to see how this Browns QB chaos plays out, you should definitely be subscribed.
Why not trade him? But instead of clarity, they've been given confusion, cryptic pressers, inflated trade demands, and a franchise seemingly more concerned with saving face than making football decisions. At the heart of this storm is a team unable to reconcile talent with ego. Sanders' value has become a battleground between pride and pragmatism, with Cleveland clinging to an unrealistic second-round asking price that undercuts their own refusal to play him. Stefanski's defensive posture has become symbolic of a franchise more interested in posturing than planning. As the Jets intensify their pursuit and the trade deadline looms, the Browns are faced with a decision that could define their season and reveal just how far off course they've drifted. Kevin Stefanski opened his mouth, said almost nothing, and somehow set off one of the loudest controversies of the NFL season. And no, that's not an exaggeration. What was already a simmering quarterback controversy has now erupted into an all-out public relations firestorm, fueled by vague statements, delusional trade demands, and a complete lack of direction from the Cleveland Browns. The core issue? Shedeur Sanders. A rookie quarterback with limited NFL experience but undeniable upside. And yet, he's become the central figure in a story that spiraled from quiet whispers to full-blown chaos. The New York Jets want him. Badly. They've been painted as practically obsessed with acquiring him, reportedly seeing him as their franchise savior. The Browns, on the other hand, are acting like they're sitting on a gold mine, refusing to play Sanders, but also refusing to trade him unless they get a second-round pick. That would be laughable if it weren't so frustrating. Because here's the uncomfortable truth. Cleveland has handled the situation so poorly that it stopped being about Sanders' actual talent and started being about the dysfunction within the organization. Fans aren't just confused, they're angry, and they should be, because this whole situation reeks of ego, stubbornness, and mismanagement. The signs have been there for weeks. Stefanski's press conferences have gone from vague to flat-out evasive. He's been asked direct questions about Sanders, his role, his development, his future, and instead of giving real answers, he's given empty platitudes. He's a part of this team. We're evaluating every option. We're focused on winning this week. Over and over again. But behind those words is a glaring reality. Shedeur Sanders has barely been allowed to take meaningful snaps, despite injuries and struggles at the quarterback position. So when a coach says he's part of the team, but refuses to use him when it counts, that's not clarity. That's spin. The Browns are trying to project calm, but they're coming off like they're in full meltdown mode. The contradictions are obvious to everyone. If Sanders is good enough to command a high pick in a trade, why haven't they put him on the field? And if he's not ready to start, then why demand a premium return? You can't treat someone like a franchise quarterback in trade negotiations and then treat them like an afterthought in your own locker room. That double standard is what set this entire fiasco on fire. And now, with the trade deadline fast approaching, it's become painfully clear. Cleveland has no plan. Or if they do, they're doing everything possible to keep it hidden, even from themselves. The Jets, meanwhile, are doing what desperate franchises do, making bold public moves. They've made it known they want Sanders. They're pushing, calling, negotiating. And while some might mock their approach as overeager or reckless, at least they're doing something. At least they've picked a direction. Cleveland? Still stuck in neutral, watching the flames rise. And it's not just media and fans fueling this. The locker room isn't blind. Players see who gets reps. They see who's being talked about. They see how a young quarterback with potential is being mishandled and undervalued. That kind of internal tension doesn't just go away. It spreads. Because when your coach can't explain why a talented player isn't playing and your front office values him at a level they refuse to back up on the field, you don't just have a personnel issue. You've got a culture problem. You've got a trust issue. And in a league as brutal and competitive as the NFL, that can spiral quickly, Cleveland is trying to play it cool. But cool doesn't work when the house is on fire. They had a chance to get ahead of this. They could have either played Sanders, given him real reps, let the fan base see what he's got, or quietly made a deal before the media circus took over. But instead, they waited, they stalled, and now they're trapped in a mess of their own making. Every minute that passes without a decision makes it worse. If they trade him now, it looks like they caved. If they don't trade him and continue to keep him on the bench, it's another week of memes, criticism, and growing distrust. If they suddenly star him now, it looks like a panic move. There's no clean exit, and the timing couldn't be worse. With the trade deadline closing in, the Browns are officially on the clock. Every other team in the league knows they're vulnerable. That's not leverage. It's desperation, and the Jets are using it. They're negotiating like they've already won, because in a lot of ways, they've exposed Cleveland, exposed the cracks in the foundation, exposed just how badly this front office handles pressure. It's hard to overstate how much damage this has done, not just to Sanders' trade value, but to Cleveland's credibility as a franchise. They're being talked about not as a playoff contender, but as a case study in mismanagement. And every time Stefanski dodges another question, every time the front office pretends they're in control, the perception only gets worse. The NFL is a league of perception as much as it is performance. And right now, the perception around Cleveland is that they're not just struggling, they're lost. So what happens next? If the Browns don't trade Sanders, they better have a real plan to integrate him into the offense. Fast. Not in theory, in action. Otherwise, they'll be left holding a player they've already alienated, with a fan base that's running out of patience and a media cycle that's not letting this go. And if they do trade him, especially for less than what they've demanded, they'll have to answer for why it took this long and why it spiraled into this public mess in the first place. Either way, this moment is going to define how people view this coaching staff and this front office, not just for this season, but for years. Let us know what you think. Should Cleveland just pull the trigger and send Sanders to the Jets? Should they finally give him a real shot on the field? Or has this whole saga already done too much damage to be fixed? Hit like if you've been watching this unfold like the rest of us. Stunned, frustrated, and maybe a little entertained by the chaos. Drop your take in the comments and subscribe so you don't miss whatever wild twist comes next. Because if we've learned anything from this disaster, it's that in Cleveland the drama never ends. Just when you think Cleveland might hit rock bottom, they start digging deeper. The Browns aren't just losing control of a trade negotiation. They're losing the plot entirely. What started as a straightforward decision, develop a promising rookie or trade him to a team that has morphed into a slow-motion collapse of credibility. This isn't about Shedeur Sanders anymore. This is about a franchise so consumed by optics and internal politics that it can't even manage its own talent without turning it into a national headline. Let's get real. No NFL team demands a second-round pick for a rookie they refuse to play unless they're bluffing. Hard. Cleveland's front office seems to believe that by overvaluing Sanders in public, they'll pressure a desperate team like the Jets into caving. But what they've actually done is trap themselves. Because when you talk about value, but don't show it on the field, you end up in no man's land. Too stubborn to trade, too scared to commit. And now, the entire league is watching them flounder. New York? They've done everything short of buying a billboard to say, "We want Sanders." Reports describe them as fixated. Their fan base is treating the guy like the second coming, and the front office is behaving accordingly. They've built him up in their minds as the answer to their offensive woes, the missing piece. And maybe they're right. Or maybe they're just clinging to hope like it's a Hail Mary. Either way, they're trying. They're positioning. They're acting. Meanwhile, Cleveland is stuck in an endless loop of non-answers and power plays. Kevin Stefanski's pressers have turned into a weekly episode of How Not to Handle a Quarterback Situation. You get more insight from a magic 8-ball than you would from anything he said at a podium in the past month. And that silence, that dodging, it speaks volumes. You can hear the frustration boiling over, not just in the media, but in the fan base. Brown supporters aren't just mad about Sanders. They're mad because this is what it always turns into. Promising draft picks turn cautionary tales. Confusing roster decisions. Strategic indecision wrapped in fake confidence. It's a rerun they've seen 1,000 times, and they know how it ends. Badly. This was supposed to be different. This was the team that finally had momentum. That was building something. That was learning from its mistakes. And now, they're back to being a franchise with a reputation for self-inflicted wounds. And let's talk about that locker room, because players see this stuff. You think they don't notice when a talented young QB gets sidelined while the team plays musical chairs with underperforming veterans? You think it doesn't create tension when coaches say one thing in public and do another behind closed doors? That's the kind of dysfunction that festers. That splits rooms. That turns seasons into wasted opportunities. And it's all playing out like a reality show. Every quote, every leaked report, every Twitter rumor, it's all feeding the beast. The NFL media machine is in overdrive, and Cleveland is giving it endless fuel. They become the storyline, and not in a good way. Meanwhile, Sanders is caught in the middle of it. A rookie quarterback, dragged through a months-long PR disaster he didn't create. Every move the Browns make, or don't make, impacts his confidence, his trajectory, his future. And that damage doesn't just disappear. You can't develop a quarterback in a cloud of uncertainty. You can't expect him to grow when he's being used as a bargaining chip. And if they do decide to keep him after all this, then what? How do you walk into that quarterback room and pretend nothing happened? How do you regain trust after letting trade rumors spin for weeks without giving him clarity? That's not development. That's sabotage. If they trade him, they'll take heat for the chaos. If they don't, they'll take heat for the dysfunction. There is no clean exit anymore. That window closed weeks ago. Now it's about damage control, about limiting how much longer this embarrassment hangs over the organization. Because right now, the entire situation looks like a team imploding under its own ego. You got a front office that's too proud to admit they overplayed their hand. You got a head coach that seems completely detached from the quarterback room. And you got a player whose potential is being suffocated by indecision and silence. And that second-round pick they're asking for? It's become a punchline. You don't get premium value for a player you refuse to use. You don't get to claim he's a top-tier asset while burying him on the depth chart. That kind of hypocrisy doesn't just kill trade talks. It kills credibility. So what's the end game? Does Cleveland finally pull the trigger and send Sanders to New York? Do they back down from their asking price and salvage what's left of their leverage? Or do they double down, keep him, and risk turning the saga into an even bigger disaster? At this point, no matter what they do, the damage is done. The perception around this team has taken a hit, not just in the media, but across the league. And that matters. Because when free agents are choosing where to sign, when players are deciding where they want to be long-term, they look at stuff like this. They look at how teams handle conflict, how they support or fail to support their own. And right now, Cleveland's sending a loud, clear message. When things get tough, they stall. They waffle. They hide behind vague statements and unrealistic trade demands while the rest of the league moves on. It's not just a bad look. It's a red flag. Because here's the thing. Talent alone doesn't build contenders. Culture does. Direction does. Leadership does. And this organization is showing none of the above right now. You've got a quarterback the Jets are ready to roll the dice on. You've got a fan base desperate for a spark. And you've got a front office standing there with its arms crossed, acting like they're running a championship dynasty instead of a team clinging to relevance. The audacity would be funny if it weren't so tragic. Let's be blunt. You don't get to play hardball when you're fumbling the ball internally. You don't get to demand top-tier trade value while simultaneously devaluing the asset you're trying to move. That's not strategy. That's self-sabotage. The Browns' stance on Shedeur Sanders has crossed from tough negotiation into full-blown delusion. A second-round pick for a rookie they refuse to play? A rookie who, according to reports, isn't even being developed properly behind the scenes? That kind of logic only makes sense inside a franchise where the front office and the coaching staff aren't aligned. And from the outside looking in, that seems exactly like what's happening. Stefanski is out here giving the press nothing. Cryptic one-liners. Non-committal half-answers. We believe in all our guys. Cool, but who's actually starting? Who's getting the reps in practice? Who's the quarterback of the future? Because fans are tired of waiting for a plan to show up. This isn't a chess game. This is a stalled-out offense and a locker room begging for clarity. And yet, the Browns act like they've got time. Like this whole saga isn't actively burning goodwill with fans and morale within the roster. They're doing that thing, again, where pride becomes a primary decision-maker, where the fear of being wrong becomes more important than doing what's right. Let's zoom out for a second. This is a team that's had more quarterback controversies than playoff wins in the last 2 decades. They've drafted talent and ruined it. They've hired coaches and fired them just as fast. They've cycled through GM schemes, slogans. And now, in what was supposed to be a more stable, smarter era, they're doing it all over again, just dressed up in silence and press-friendly language. It's not just about Sanders anymore. It's about the culture that allowed this to happen. The Browns didn't have to turn this into a media circus. They could have played him, or traded him, but they didn't. Instead, they chose the messiest possible option, stringing everyone along, sending mixed messages, and pretending everything's fine while the walls are clearly cracking. And the Jets? You think they haven't noticed? Of course they have. They're watching Cleveland's leverage evaporate by the day. They're not panicking. They're playing the long game. Because the longer this drags out, the more desperate Cleveland looks. The more fractured the situation becomes. The more likely the Browns are cave and accept far less than they were demanding just a few weeks ago. New York smells blood in the water, and Cleveland's doing nothing to stop the bleeding. They keep waiting for someone else to make the first move. But leadership isn't about reacting. It's about deciding. It's about owning the situation, even if it's messy, even if it means taking a PR hit. Instead, the Browns are hiding behind silence, hoping the controversy dies down. Spoiler, it won't. Not when the internet is flooded with memes mocking their dysfunction. Not when every sports show is roasting their indecision. Not when fans are literally chanting Sanders' name in frustration. This isn't going away. If anything, it's growing. And the longer they pretend otherwise, the more damage they do. Not just to Sanders, but to the entire franchise. Because how do you look a locker room in the eye and say you're building for the future when you're actively torpedoing a potential part of that future out of ego? How do you claim to value development when you won't even give your young quarterback a chance? Not even in mop-up duty. Even if Sanders doesn't end up being a star, that's not the point. The point is that this franchise can't keep playing defense against itself. It has to pick a direction and go. Right now, they're just spinning. The kind of spinning that kills careers and tanks seasons. And the clock is still ticking. The trade deadline isn't going to wait for them to figure it out. If they don't act soon, they'll be stuck. Stuck with a disgruntled locker room. Stuck with a frustrated fan base. Stuck with a quarterback they don't trust but won't let go. And stuck with a narrative that paints them as chaotic, disorganized, and out of touch. Because that's what this is really about. Control. The Browns have lost control of the story. They're no longer writing the script. They're reacting to it. And the Jets? They're fine with that. They'll wait. They'll watch Cleveland squirm. And when the time is right, they'll strike. That's how smart franchises operate. So, what are we doing here, Cleveland? Are we holding on to Sanders out of pride? Out of fear? Out of some belief that the market will magically shift back in your favor after you've trashed your own leverage? Or are we finally ready to face the music? Because let's be clear, there's no salvaging this quietly. That window's closed. Whatever happens now is going to be loud, and messy, and public. So the only question is, do the Browns want to control the fallout or be swallowed by it? You'd think, after all these years of chaos, they have learned to see this moment coming. But here we are, same pattern, different year. A player with promise, a front office with pride, a coach playing diplomat while the building smolders, and a franchise spinning its wheels while everyone else moves forward. Here's the kicker. The Browns still think they're holding the cards. In their minds, keeping Shedeur Sanders sidelined somehow increases his trade value. Like if they wrap him in mystery and only offer cryptic sound bites, they'll turn him into some kind of high-demand enigma. But in reality, they're turning potential into resentment. They're watching leverage turn into liability. Because at a certain point, the rest of the league stops playing along. Everyone knows what's happening. The Jets know. The fans know. The media knows. Sanders knows. And when the smoke clears, Cleveland's going to have an answer for this. Not just for how they handled a possible trade, but for what it revealed about their culture, about their leadership, about their complete inability to either commit or concede. There's no master plan here, just noise. And in that noise, Shedeur Sanders' future is being stalled by the very team that should have either backed him or let him grow somewhere else. But instead, he's become a symbol of everything the Browns haven't figured out: identity, vision, and trust. So now we wait for the next press conference, for the next awkward quote, for the next missed opportunity. Because that's what this has turned into, a waiting game for a team that can't seem to act. Let us know how you play it. Keep Sanders, trade him, or finally pick a lane and stop the circus. Hit like if you've been following every twist in this wild ride. Drop your thoughts below, and don't forget to subscribe. It's Cleveland. You know there's more chaos coming.